so excited that we got to this fucking episode. It's been so long since we've had, like, a bedrock episode of this show.
Yeah.
Like, one of those, like, really, like show-defining episodes. And,
that we come back to.
And I think that this is just, like, there's so much meat here. Like, I just want to talk about it.
There's a lot to talk about in this episode. Do you just want to get right into it?
Yes, please.
All right, tell me about it.
Tell me about it.
We got to start off. We didn't do any intro or anything.
All right.
Rewind.
When the spawn meets world, when the spawn meets world.
What up, bruh? And welcome to Bruh Meets World.
When this Bruh Meets World.
Your Boy Meets World fan show, episode 58. I'm Ceej.
And I'm TC.
We already talked about this a lot, so
yeah.
Just going to jump right into the
Tell me about it.
This is episode 12 of season 3. Don't know why I said it that way. The grass is always greener.
Ain't it though?
Feeling uncomfortably domesticated, Corey forsakes a date with Topanga for a boys' night out at another school's party and is mistaken for Sean, an error he fails to correct when he sees how popular it makes him. However, Corey is surprised to find out he's not the only one that's pretending to be someone else.
Okay, so I don't know if you remember this, but a few episodes ago, I was talking about, like, Corey was saying how, I'm gonna get Topanga, and we're gonna go to, like, Pottery Barn, and, like...
Make jams or something like that.
And I was talking about this trope that they use with Corey and Topanga, where they make them seem like a much older couple than they were.
Yeah.
And I can't tell you just, like, how excited I am that that's something that was explored, something that was dove into. The fact that this show begins with, this episode begins with Corey sleeping on the couch while Amy and Topanga watch a chick flick.
Which I thought was really cool because we don't see... Again, these are two female characters that we just honestly don't see hang out a lot.
Great, yeah, I have no problem with that. The thing was is that the Super Bowl was on, and upstairs, Alan and Eric were watching that, and there was nothing that Topanga was said that, like, she was like, hey, if you want to go upstairs and watch the game, it's fine. And he's like, no, it's fine. Like, Corey has muted himself for Topanga without him asking her, and that is something that's been very apparent throughout their relationship we've seen from them so far.
A few things. One, I just want to note, if you think for 1 second that Alan and Eric and Corey would let Amy and Topanga watch the Super Bowl in the living room while they watch it in the bedroom, unless Alan and Amy have a big screen in that bedroom, that ain't happening.
No, yeah. I noticed that too, and I was like, why aren't they at Chubby's? Like, that's where they're watching the Super Bowl episode.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. That is ridiculous. But then also... You're right. There's this idea that is explored in this episode that Corey's the one who they were like feeling uncomfortably domesticated. Corey domesticated himself.
He's the one who got like Couples Magazine. He's the one who's been doing all of that, like, I'm excited to go get slacks, all that shit.
But I think he's been modeling his parents.
Yes, 100%. This is a great example of someone trying to mimic love that they've seen without understanding what love actually is.
Absolutely. So that's how our first thoughts are. Let's do this roll call so we can really dive into it. So, God, I didn't even get into the B storyline, which is Eric and the poker game.
Another B storyline of Eric playing a random non-athletic sport.
But I think this is interesting because it brings up a lot of things just with this Dr. Sorrell character.
Yeah.
Who we saw earlier. He's the chemistry teacher. He's back again, and
he's not a doctor.
I think he's
No, at the end, remember Feeney's like, you're not a doctor, yeah.
I think it's that whole thing where it goes back to, like, he has his PhD, and that's why he's considered Dr. Sorrell. But I also feel like it's that common joke in the 90s where, like, they have it on Friends, where Ross is like, it's actually Dr. Geller.
Yeah.
It's like, no one cares about your PhD.
Yeah.
And I think that's the joke. But anyway, he admits to taking bribes. He admits to taking bribes, and he then goes and quits his job and is like, hey, Eric, want to go with me to Atlantic City? So there's that whole thing. Yeah.
I really got to see if I wrote anything about this Eric storyline because there was one thing. Um, Eric goes back to school to get his books.
Well,
Eric
yeah.
will
So
try to-
like, so what happens is, and just to kind of, so sorry, but to kind of dive into the B storyline, what happens is we see every teacher that we've met so far come to Eric, and they've all given Eric extensions on their projects.
Yes.
Feeney, this Dr. Sorrell, Eli, and Jonathan all go to Eric, and they're like, "Hey, dude, you're not going to graduate if I don't get the things that I need from you."
And
Which is, again, really important considering everything that we've known about Eric so far.
No, but the reason why that's shit is because, like we've seen Eric go to Feeney like, hey, what can I do to help me get into college? Like, I'm actively seeking out help to do better at school.
But last week, Eric didn't know he was in Jonathan's class.
That's what I mean. Like, they can't decide if this dude is serious about college or not.
I think it's the classic, some episodes were shown out of order, possibly.
Maybe.
But also, I just will say, in the last few episodes, there has been an arc of Eric being the old Eric, of being preoccupied with women, of having fun, and of not really focusing on school the way that we thought he would at the beginning of the season.
Well, we do learn he has a learning disability in this episode.
He's kind of like Rain Man.
No, dude, this is the lazy shit I'm talking about. Because we already had an episode where Sean said that he was an idiot savant because that's how he could speak French without understanding.
But I mean, I think you and I both know that, especially in later episodes and later seasons, Eric is an idiot savant. Like, that's something that they maybe move away from with Sean, but these are two things where, like, the two of them, especially at this point in time, they're in the same boat as this lovable idiot.
I feel like idiot savants in that same boat of, like, amnesia, and that it's a trope that television shows would lean on without truly understanding, like,
what an idiot savant is.
Yeah, 100%, because it's not something that one episode a character can just be like, oh yeah, I have a learning disability, and then it's just like, we're not gonna really...
You don't think there are elements of
I think
Eric...
they did it for a joke. That's my thing, is that they used the learning disability as a joke.
But, like, didn't we earlier see when Eric was doing this whole brain study thing where they're like, there's nothing going on here? And it's just like, we've kind of always seen something...
Oh my god, so you're saying that Eric actually is an idiot savant, that it's not just for the joke because of the fact that he seems to be perceptively dumb, yet seems to also excel in certain ways.
Absolutely. I mean, what I'm saying is, even the way they play it off with him, Eric doesn't, when he's playing cards, Eric doesn't know that he's counting cards. Eric's just counting cards because to him, that's how you play the game. When he drops the pretzels or whatever, he's like, oh, it's only 527 pretzels.
No. Then why can't he pass a single test?
Well,
Why
he
can't
can't-
he
well,
even
wait,
do
wait,
better
wait.
math?
Wait, that's because Eric, here's the thing, and we even explored this at the end of last season. Eric, the pressure and the stress that comes with test taking is completely different with how Eric's mind operates. Eric is remember, let's take a future episode when Eric is in the museum with Alan and he's looking at the man with two coconuts.
Yes.
And
Famous
he
scene.
reads into it perfectly. And Alan's like, I didn't see that. And then they show you later that, like, that's actually what it was going on. I think, and even later on when we see Eric as I think he's in Girl Meets World, he's a politician or whatever. Eric is someone who just does not learn in the way that he's supposed to. He is a teenager who has different interests. And school does not work for him. And so he almost always writes it off. But Eric is smart, he is perceptive, and he is someone who has talent outside of school.
You know what? I don't disagree with any of that. I just wish that this show would lean into this whole, we need to teach these kids in different new ways in order for them to learn things.
I agree. And I think that now there would be a whole story arc about how Eric doesn't work conventionally, or that maybe even Eric has dyslexia and we don't know.
Eddie Winslow had dyslexia, I believe. So
I'm just saying, it's something that we learn later on. In later seasons, they do a lot of Eric being this idiot savant.
Yeah.
And I think that these are the areas where it's like they're showing us that Eric's a different type of intelligent, and the only people who really pick up on it are people who want to take advantage of him.
Interesting.
That I do think that is something to
Sure.
say.
Do you have anything else to say about this B storyline?
I just wanted to point out
Yeah,
that
yeah,
Dr.
yeah.
Sorrell was like completely
He quit his job so that he could go to Atlantic City with an idiot savant. Like, guys, I mean,
But then also, I do like the idea of all of the teachers that we've come to meet so far go to Eric, and they're like, "Hey, man, you're not doing any of your work." And I only say that because I know that this season, Eric struggles with education. And it's kind of it's like this continual thread where the main storyline here isn't, hey, Eric, study.
Yeah.
It's, what is Eric doing besides studying?
yeah.
And even Feeney kind of participates in it because he's like, all right, let me play one game, and once I lose, I can go back to studying. And Feeney, they all look to Feeney, and Feeney's like, yeah, sure, why not? But it just keeps going, and at no point in time is Feeney even like, all right, you've had enough. Go study.
In fact, he probably studies way less than he would have had Feeney just dismissed him from begin with, because he wouldn't have spent the whole night playing poker.
Exactly. So I do think it was really important to bring that up.
Sure.
But we can go back to the main storyline, which I know is what you came for.
Yes, 100%.
So just two other minor characters before we get to our big main character. On roll call, there's Eric Egan, who is Brent, and which is the guy at the party.
Yeah.
And then there's Marissa Viador, who plays Tara.
Okay.
Which is girl at party. And then
Once again,
yeah,
Mia Saveri.
Yeah, exactly.
The second time. She plays the New York cousin that Sean goes on the date with Eric.
Right. So she plays two different characters.
Yep.
I was like, I've just seen you recently, but she's in everything in the 90s.
Yeah,
so,
100%.
And she plays Hillary, the girl who goes to the other school.
Yes.
I think it's Hamilton High.
Yeah, it is actually. Well, it's Philadelphia. It makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay, so where do you want to start with this?
I think we should start with we started off a little bit of
the domestication. Because Corey mentions that him and Topanga, they go to the mall together. This was actually funny. I wrote this down. Corey's saying how he went to the mall with Topanga after spending the weekend doing stuff with their parents or something.
Yeah.
And the audience loses it as if it's this really sexy thing that they were alone at the mall together.
Again, I said last time, they're getting out of control with these woos.
Yeah, because the mall is basic as fuck for a high school relationship.
Exactly.
So I don't know what that was about. But it just shows that Corey is trying to pretend all this stuff makes him happy when it's clear that he is way more interested in what Sean is doing.
He's almost is desperately, I need to live through you.
Yes.
And so there are a few things that I wanted to bring up with this. One, I think it's interesting that Sean considers himself an expert on love. And again, it's very interesting that...
Well, he's no rocket Scientologist.
But it is interesting that this is what Sean considers himself good at.
Yes, women.
Especially considering later on in the season.
Yes.
So... Again, I just think that this is very interesting that he's like, hey, what am I good at? And Corey's confused. But also it's no, I know women and I know love.
Which is so weird because if Sean thinks that he knows what love is and he's the one providing Corey with advice.
I know, this is my point. But I will say one thing that Sean gets right is that Corey needs to be himself more. And... ironically, the only way he can get Corey to be himself is for Corey to be Sean.
Yes.
And it's really, really, even when they're at the party, he keeps saying, they think I'm you, I'm doing all, you're, everything is, in Corey's mind, filtered through Sean, and it's because he's Sean that he is being reacted to. But Sean even says, I don't do anything. I'm just myself, and when you're yourself, people like you as well.
My problem with just this whole switch 'em up, which I think narratively works really well, but the archetype of just this like suave ladies man that like women literally fawn over from just the name is not something that Sean experiences at John Adams.
Well, it's not at John Adams, but think about it. I thought about this. Sean's reputation precedes him at Hamilton High, and it would not do him any good at John Adams. Why? Because at John Adams, everyone there is like, "Oh, I'm just another girl to you." But from Hamilton High, everyone hears about this guy who has dated everyone, and that sounds intriguing. He's a mystery. Sean's realistic in John Adams, but at Hamilton, he's a legend.
It's funny that Sean's looks play no part in the attention that he gets, that it's all reputation, that literally just him not wearing a jacket and like people not knowing it's him, he doesn't get. I just thought that was a very interesting thing.
Well, I think what you're diving into is that, especially as the show is setting it up, it's how people perceive you. It's not necessarily who you really are. You know what I mean? And like you can be anyone when you're in a new place. Again, I don't think that that's the lesson of this episode. I think that what it's showing is because of the reputation of Sean and who that is, when Corey is mistaken for Sean, anything he does is immediately cool. And Sean understands that. Sean understands that he's not doing anything to be cool. It's not his looks. It's just his carefree attitude.
Sure.
That is what's really propelling him.
I you know what? I was just kind of Googling this because I was curious. This whole idea of Corey going to a party dressed as someone else and his girlfriend going to the party dressed as someone else, it felt Shakespearean. I was like, where this...
Oh, like, that's it? It is?
Yeah. I was like, what is this? Like, I recognize this trope.
Is that A Midsummer?
That's what I was thinking, but like, I don't really know enough about it to know for sure. There's nothing about it online of it being some kind of like call
It's
out.
definitely a trope of like mistaken idea. This is one that happens a lot.
Yeah.
And again, it is supposed to be. It's almost always supposed to be a reflection of who you wanted to be the entire time.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like there's a whole moment of at some point in time you stopped pretending and you just were.
Yeah.
And even like again, kind of like the advice that Sean gives, it's like relax and be myself.
Yeah.
You know, it's just like just drop all the trying, and once you will be, they will be.
Once you stop, a girl will come up, ask you to dance. You will then perform dancing that is filled with so much
Oh my god.
caucasity that it will make people feel uncomfortable who watch it on TV. Watching Ben Savage dance was very, very uncomfortable.
Absolutely. But he did have 3 ladies around him.
And with those moves, there's no way that's that.
But again, reputation. And I will say that this reminds me of, I doubt you have ever done this, but I will confess and be like, there have definitely been times where you hook up with someone or you trying to be with someone because you're like, oh, their reputation or that they're hot, and you're like, yeah, this will be great. And then afterwards you're like, that was not worth my time.
Sure.
At all, in the slightest. But because I now am part of the experience, I'm also now part of the lie. And it's not that, like, if I were to be honest with myself, I would be like, that wasn't anything special.
Yeah.
But if anyone asks, I'm like, oh yeah, I got to dance with Sean Hunter. You get what I'm saying?
Sure,
So
yeah,
it's like, it's part of being able to be part of the tale and less about who Sean Hunter really is. Because I have a feeling that those girls that evening, they were like, oh, weren't you dancing with Sean Hunter? It's like, yeah.
Yeah.
And to be someone who Sean Hunter finds attractive, again, Sean Hunter has this reputation, it's enough in it to just be in that circle.
Sure.
And part of the halves, I guess, so to speak. Am I making sense?
Yeah, no.
And that's how I saw this whole thing going down. I saw all the girls at this school really leaning into Corey. Again, not because Corey's overly attractive or smooth. It's not like he becomes Stefan or Kel.
Sure.
He's still Corey. He's still dorky, but it's seen as endearing because people refuse to be wrong, and you need things to live up to their hype,
Yeah.
especially in the moment. So you're going to tell yourself, it was probably a letdown, but as far as everyone else is concerned, I got to dance with Sean Hunter.
Well, when you really think about the role that expectation plays in relationships, you could almost say that the reason why Corey and Topanga end their relationship at the end of this episode is because they want to explore the things that they're told they should be interested in.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so let's even talk about that for a second. Let's talk about the fact that Sean is like, lie to Topanga, tell her you're just gonna have a boys' night, which honestly is not really a lie if you're just like, hey, I'm gonna go somewhere with Sean.
Yeah.
It's just what you could do. And he's like, no, I can't cancel. And Topanga is the one who comes up to him and is like, hey, my girls want to hang out tonight. Do you mind if I do that instead? And there's this, of course, manipulation that Corey tries to do. And he's just like, oh, I guess, yeah, if you're going to do that, I'll, like, as if he didn't have plans with. I think the problem is the secrecy that they have.
The fact that they didn't feel they could tell each other they wanted to have a night apart. The fact that they couldn't be honest about what was happening. The fact that their relationship was getting so boring that, like, this was something that they were willing to risk their relationship for. It's all very revealing.
It's very revealing, but it's also very typical. And I think for me, I was upset watching it because it's like, you both want the same things. Yeah. You both came to the same party. You both pretended to be other people. So what you're saying is, hey, you and I are on the exact same page. We both don't like what we were doing together. We both wanted to be someone else and be a little bit more risky. So why not just be like, hey, why don't we include this in our relationship?
Fam, I wrote the same thing. I was like, they don't need a break. They need to have a conversation. Like, they need to work on communication skills because clearly neither of them are happy with the way things are, but they both want the same things, like you said. So
exactly. I wrote, the feeling of curiosity and being in a rut is very common. They both missed the excitement. So they, like, it's hard to express that. And yes. I will say, at that age, I can understand. Even, like, as you said, I feel like they feel trapped in expectations.
Yeah.
They're like, for Corey, for example, if you're in a loving relationship, this is what you do.
Sure.
And for Topanga, who, as far as we know, she's never really had a boyfriend before Corey. For her, she's like, if this is what Corey wants to do and I love Corey, then this is, I guess, what we're doing as a couple. But they're both like, it's that gift of the Magi thing. It's like, I'm doing this for you. It's like, no, I was doing this for you. And it's like, no, neither of you wanted that.
You know what's really interesting is that they break up because of their, like, their rush to domesticate. Yet when they get back together, they domesticate so easily to the point where it becomes like a joke in the show. And it seems like they lean into the thing that broke them up the first time, which is very whatever. So I'm not going to comment on that too much now. But here's a question for you. What if Corey didn't go to this dance? What if Sean went to this dance and saw that Topanga was the French girl and he had to decide? I mean, obviously he would tell Corey. He wouldn't hesitate to tell Corey. But just like for that to just be a thing, like would that have been interesting at all? Obviously, it's a completely different episode, but I just wanted to get your thoughts on that.
Well, I think what's interesting is, to me, the idea that there's this French girl here. Which, again, as an avid TV watcher, you already understand what's going on. But the fact that when
France is the gateway to St. Louis.
But when she turns around and it's Topanga, I have to admit, there is like a moment of like, oh, you are caught.
Yeah.
And there is no escape. And it's not like she's just a French girl. He's like, hey, do you want to dance? And she's like, yeah, you know, like she's about it. She's about being with someone else. And what's interesting about that moment is Corey immediately is hypocritical.
Yes.
Immediately.
Mad at her for doing the same thing.
He's mad at her. He's like, oh, so you just had to pretend to be someone else?
You want to explain to me what you're doing here? And in English, please?
Me and my girlfriends thought it would be fun to come to another school's party.
Yeah, and pretend to be other people?
Well, what's wrong with that?
Well, what's wrong with being you, Topanga?
Nothing. We're being French. I don't know, it seemed exciting.
Yeah, well, it takes a pretty insecure person to pretend to be other people.
Hi, Sean. I've been looking for you. Sean?
Topanga's like, oh, so you're here. And again, it becomes this blame game.
Yeah, of course.
You know what I mean? And I think that what you're saying about Topanga, if she had just went and Corey wasn't there and Sean was, I think that in reality, we needed to be asking the questions, why did you feel the need to come here?
I think it would have forced a conversation.
Exactly.
I think it wouldn't have led to a breakup. It would have led to a conversation where they would have grown and gotten better from it. Because she would have felt obligated to talk to Corey before Sean did.
Exactly. But I think that this episode shows, and it's true in teenage years, but also as adults, so many people would prefer to be angry than to discuss how they feel the exact same way.
Sure. I thought the conversation that Corey and Topanga, I remember this from when it first aired. The conversation they have outside the dance is one of my earliest memories of the show, and I remember being very uncomfortable watching it with my mom because even at that young age, I was so heavily invested into Corey and Topanga's relationship that I didn't want her to see me reacting emotional to their breakup.
That's so like, oh, that's kind of cute. That's really cute.
Something else that I just want to mention, just while we're on like the dance, before we get into like the Corey Topanga, how they finish out. One thing is that one of my biggest pet peeves is when TGIF has a dance scene because ABC never gives them money for copyright music, so there's always just a generic porn elevator music playing in the background. And one other thing that also became extremely evident to me was that I figured out Eric and Sean on this show. So I thought that Eric and Sean were just taking turns wearing the Joey Tribbiani hat. The sitcom dumb, I'm just going to say dumb things for jokes purposes. But what I realized when we met blonde kid, what's his name?
Brent.
When I met Brent, when he was as dumb, like when Topanga spoke and he's like, I understand French, I realized something that this show is doing. They are trying to show us that all kids are dumb. They're being extreme with it, but it's their way of reminding us that these kids are not in a position to be making smart or great choices, which often leads to their educational experiences. So when you understand that whenever you see Sean or Eric saying something that's so over the top dumb, it's more so them commenting on the on youth and the maturity more than they are the actual intellect of those characters. I know that's a big sandwich to chew.
No, I would say that I agree with you, which is why the conversations that we had earlier about Eric, I would tie into that.
Okay.
And then B, something that I was gonna say is a lot of the funny scenes in this are like, even like there's this moment where Corey and Topanga are arguing, and they say something. I can't remember who, but one of them says something along the lines of, well, we're not other people. It's like, well, this is what other people do. And it's like, well, we're not other people. And it's like, at that moment, they're both dressed as other people. And for me, it goes right back to what you were saying of like this maturity level of like not being able to see what's right in front of you.
Yes.
And like, so for the guy not being able to see that Topanga doesn't know French, and your mind doesn't now understand French, she was lying.
Yes.
And for them to not understand that you literally became other people in this evening, and you have the ignorance to say a statement such as, well, other people don't apply to us. We're not like other people.
I just want to give this show a lot of credit because I feel like what they do with Topanga and Corey's relationship at this point of the show, when like they could have been the cover of Teen Beat, like they could have really milked this a lot more and done something different with it. They chose to add such a adult, complicated issue into a relationship where it's
so heavy.
Like Kelly and Zach never suffered from, oh, I'm not living my true self when I'm with you. Like that's such a complicated relationship thing, and for them to tackle with teenagers, and I want to talk about this more later, but Topanga saying maybe the people who hate each other are the people who wait too long to break up. Bruh, that shit won the episode for me, because I was just like, wow, they are doing some deep shit with children.
Absolutely. And I think that this episode is an example, but Michael Jacobs' willingness to go there with these children is what makes Corey and Topanga such a iconic
Yeah.
story, because I looked at it, a lot of like 90s lists, or like do you remember something, and Corey Topanga relationship is like on every one of those lists. It's one of the most iconic for someone of our generation, and I think it's because they handled something like this where you never really see on TV. You don't see, at least especially in the 90s, you saw relationships break up, and you saw people have affairs and all that. You saw like the drama and the soapiness.
Yes, there was two ways a relationship ended. It was really trivial, like on Saved by the Bell or something like that, or it was Beverly Hills 90210, over the top, dramatic. So and so did something that was so extreme. Corey and Topanga shit is so relatable across the board to literally anyone.
Yeah, no one officially cheated.
No,
you both were in the wrong, and you both were in very murky territory, and you both did so at the expense of the other person thinking that you were just out with
and
friends.
we both came to the mature decision that as friends we should end this relationship before it gets to a point where we can no longer remain friends.
I feel like I still care about you as much as I always have. And that will never change.
Are we breaking up?
I don't want to break up.
Because when people break up, they always end up hating each other.
Well, we're not other people, Topanga. I see we are, but we could never hate each other, no matter who we are, right?
We are breaking up, aren't we?
No, we're not. We're never gonna break up.
Corey, maybe the people who end up hating each other are the people who waited too long to break up.
Jesus, tap dancing Christ, bro. What a fantastic way to end this episode. I don't know, man.
I mean, Topanga is emotionally more mature.
Yeah.
And I don't even feel like it's like the child savant type thing. I think it's literally, we have always seen Topanga as someone who was raised to think of things with an emotional intelligence.
Yeah.
And I could see her honestly coming to this conclusion and being like, I think the real issue here is not knowing when to let go.
I kind of wish that the show leaves them broken up a little bit longer than it does, just because this is an episode and this is a moment that I respect so highly in the show that I just wish they would have let it play out a little bit. Like high school's that thing. Sometimes you're dating someone for a little bit, and sometimes you don't talk to them for a few months.
And I love where we go from here.
Yeah, you know what? That is true. I feel like this episode kind of steers the ship a little bit closer to what we know of Boy Meets World to be. And you're right. This play between Corey and Topanga is something that's unique for children's television.
Well, also, we had talked about this earlier, but this breakup is very telling considering what you've been saying, I think, all of this season so far, which is that we also see Corey as someone who there are moments where the show kind of forgets he's with Topanga, or he kind of forgets he's with Topanga, and they're not the established couple that we know them as. This is in that world and in this timeline, it's a new relationship. And what's that like for a teenage boy to be tied down when he's meeting all of these girls and he doesn't always live up to the expectations we have of Corey? And I think one thing that everyone keeps thinking and saying is that Corey's a good guy. So he's constantly trying to live up to that expectation, but the desires are still there. I mean, we saw a few weeks ago when he got kissed that, he was like, oh yeah, I have a girlfriend, but you're still at the party, dude.
Yeah.
Last week, as you were saying, there was like the snow bunnies, and like there is this desire for him to be out and be young and be free. And that's shared and that's brought up. They're both like, look, we're young and we're in high school and maybe we should just be out here doing things.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that that's wrong. I'm just saying that the show has led us here. It's not like it just came out of nowhere. Very much like the Eric and his education thing, there have been threads of them constantly telling us he's in a relationship, but is he in it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think all of this is just done so well. I don't really have anything else to comment, but other than just again applaud this episode for being so just fucking well written.
The last thing I wanted to say is the ending where, you know, Topanga comes back and she's like, Corey, and she leaves, and then Corey comes back and maybe we shouldn't, and then he realizes that she's not there. It's a perfect scene to show that timing is everything. And I think that goes for more than just that scene. It goes for relationships. You know, it's like, not at this time. They just missed each other. Even though they both have the same intentions, they weren't on the same page.
Bro, this episode is so damn good. Between the, you know, the other people looking down, seeing each other in different clothing thing. Like, there's so many moments of this episode where they're mirroring the storylines, they're mirroring characters' developments in a way that I'm just like, keep this going, Boy Meets World. Like, this is the show I want to see.
And a little bit else I want to. There is a pride that Sean has in seeing Corey be his true self.
Yes.
And I think that that's notable too.
I think that's healthy of a friend to want another person to be healthy when they could recognize that, like, hey, you're not being your true self. I know you're saying you're happy. What's going on? Is everything okay with you and Topanga? He asks him.
Yeah. And I think, again, just I'm thinking of the scenes of like Ryder Strong and how he plays it. And it's, again, there's no malice towards Topanga, but he cares about Corey. And for him to take that back seat, he's in like a brand new school, and he could very easily just go around picking up any other girl.
Yeah.
Like, he's still Sean, but instead he literally takes a back seat and allows Corey this night to kind of explore these feelings that Corey has hidden from himself.
Can I also just like take a moment to like talk about the performances that everyone gives? Sean, Corey, Topanga, the three of them, child actors, are giving like such great performances that I'm forgetting I'm watching a show. Like, I'm just there's a word called verisimilitude, which is talks about how when you get sucked into a story and you kind of forget about the world around you. I'm in it with this episode, and I think it has to do more so with the performances of these kids.
Yeah, like I said, it's crazy because like in my mind, I know that Topanga is the French girl, but the moment she turned around, I like gasped. You know what I mean? It's just like there is an emotion in that moment, and when they both see each other and you understand the betrayal that they both have inside, and yeah. Definitely, I just agree with you. Any bruh moment?
My bruh moment was the Eric and the science teacher thing.
Yeah, that was mine too.
Yes.
Dr. Sorrell quitting his job, and first of all, admitting to taking bribes. Second of all, quitting his job to go to Atlantic City with
and
her.
man up and on Feeney too. Like,
yeah, so crazy. How about a Feeney taught me? What is the lesson of this episode?
Dude, I mean, Topanga nails it on the head. Like, let's end this before we stop being friends anymore. Like, what if people end up hating each other? People who waited too long to break up is amazing. That dude, I could listen to a whole podcast about that. Like, this is such a mature lesson, and this is it, man. This is a great. Yeah. I like it's weird because like some of the episodes that frustrate me the most are the ones I have the most to say about. But this one, I'm literally just like wow, this is why I love this show.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think my only thing is I kind of said it earlier, and it's not explicitly said in this episode, but I think a lesson that could be taken away from this episode is what's not being said. The communication aspect.
Sure.
You know what I mean? It's just like they want the exact same things, but they both don't have the words for it, and they both instead choose to just kind of do it on their own.
Yeah.
And that's what creates this tension and this moment of betrayal. So, just, you know, nut up and talk to your partner.
Absolutely.
I guess that's my thing. Okay, so what grade are you giving this?
I'm giving this episode an A.
Yes.
It would have had an A plus, but I thought the B storyline took away from it too much. So, but I'm just gonna give it a solid A episode. This is, I've mentioned it a few times. Like, if we were to make a greatest hits of Boy Meets World, this episode would be included in that series.
Absolutely. Also giving it an A. I think it does everything, not everything, but it does a lot of things perfectly. And this is definitely one you walk away from remembering.
Sure.
Also, I will say, for me, it didn't get an A plus because of the montage at the end. I mean, it's emotional,
my God,
but
dude,
it is.
that shit is cheesy as. And you know what else? It just kind of reminded me like we were so early in their relationship.
I was like, it is season 3.
Yeah,
they didn't
just started dating
until,
like 3 months ago,
and yet there's all this history.
I
I don't know, but I think taking that relationship.
I love you, and that's all I know.
I think taking that relationship and making it so serious is one of the reasons why we love this show. It's like, as a teenager, that is a huge relationship.
Yeah.
And it's just as epic as Ross and Rachel. And I think for us as teenagers, we really connected with it. So
Yeah.
I think that's what makes this episode amazing. Okay, homework.
Well, I am still in my horror movie kick. So one movie I'm going to recommend, but I'm not going to talk about too much because I hope it will be a future episode of Movie Makeover.
Yes.
Is I would really like to encourage everyone to revisit Tales from the Hood this Halloween season.
Are you serious?
Tales from the Hood was one of those movies that as a kid I kind of thought of as like a really cheap B movie. But revisiting it, this movie is so like socially woke in ways that I didn't expect it to be. And it's like if you told me that like, hey, Jordan Peele is gonna do Tales from the Hood, like I'm like, I can see that happen. And that was just one of those things I wasn't expecting. And I know Tales from the Hood's not something that maybe a lot of the traditional Boy Meets World audience is very familiar with. But it's what it sounds like. It's a black Tales from the Crypt, and but again, explore social issues in a really interesting way. So I would just encourage people to watch that.
All right, thanks. My homework is what I was watching when you came in. This show called Adam Ruins Everything.
Okay.
I don't think I've done this before. If I have, I apologize, and you should just watch the latest season. And if I have not, watch the latest season, which is Adam Ruins Everything. It's just like a very fun fact information forward show. The premise is that they'll pick a subject like diamonds or the car industry or drugs, and this basically it's kind of like Mythbusters, but for all of the I'll say common knowledge or like assumptions that we have on a topic.
Yeah.
So there are plenty of things where it's like what was one that they did not too long ago. In their drug episode, they talk about how the DARE program was not successful at all, and what it really did was introduce a lot of kids to drugs. And they basically just do a lot of the things like that where they're like, we think this, or like we think that alcohol is good for you because all of these studies come out and they're like, oh, having one glass a day is actually good for your health. They're like, yeah, but when you actually look at those studies and you remove the other factors, no, it's not. And so it's just basically, I think, Mythbusters, but for common knowledge is the best way to describe it.
It's so frustrating growing up, having like had a childhood in the 90s and figuring out that like everything that people try to do to make the world better completely backfired. Like, hey, 3 strikes, that sounds like a good plan, let's do it. Abstinence only, let's do it. Hell yeah. Respect, I mean, dare, like all that shit, like it was all just so...
Well, I think what's interesting about all of those things, and this is a completely other podcast, but you're right, all of those things had negative effects, but I think the issue is all of those things didn't address the problem.
Root issues.
Yeah, what it did was it's like, oh, crime's on the rise. Well, instead of trying to fix all of the things that are endorsing crime or like making crime more of a route that people choose, how about we just put anyone who breaks the law in jail after 3 times? Like if you do it 3 times, instead of really addressing the reason why teenagers go to drugs or why
mental health, like all that shit.
yeah, like all of these things. How about instead we just tell them don't do it?
Yeah.
You know, again, abstinence only. That's the only thing that we'll promote. Not safe sex, which is actually the better thing to teach children. We'll just tell them don't have any because that's realistic, and
Yeah.
children will listen to us when we tell them don't do this thing that not only do we do, but once you do it, you understand it's amazing.
Well, one thing I do think that at least one of the programs got right is, wow, our generation really hates cigarettes. I'll tell you that much. but
I think
we will jewel up a storm. Like,
well, it's funny because we hate cigarettes because we were introduced to the facts. And I think that that's something that one of the reasons why I love Adam Ruins Everything is because our generation really, contrary to what's going on in the pop culture and the news and everything, we really do respond to fact-based arguments.
yeah.
That's why Bill Nye was so fun for us. And what is it? I'm thinking of Miss Frizzle.
Sure.
Magic School Bus.
Yeah.
We have a curiosity and we want to learn these things.
Yeah.
And we also were just told so many lies as children that we want to learn all the many, many ways that those things no longer apply. So, yep. Check out Adam Ruins Everything. That was a promo. It's on True TV. You can find a bunch of clips on YouTube as well. But that is our episode.
Ayo. Well, and guys, you know what? If you guys are with us this long, we want to appreciate you guys for sticking with us. We want to appreciate you guys for watching this show and generating interest for Boy Meets World, because as this episode proves, it's just such an important show in our childhood and for millennials alike.
Absolutely. So, reach out to us at Bro Meets World on all of the places. Email us at bromeetsworld@gmail.com. You can find me on Twitter at Extra Ceej. That's XTRACEEJ. Tony.
You can find me at @braverme at .braver.me on Instagram.
And remember to dream,
To try.
and to do good.
do good.
Later, bros.
Later.